Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast. Today we're going to be breaking down and recapping Cage Warriors 159, which took place in San Diego, California. If you've been listening to the pod for a while, you know that I'm a little bit lukewarm on these California cards. For the most part, I don't think they're very great at all, but the previous card was pretty damn good, and this one was also, I guess I'll rephrase it. I don't have a problem with the cards so much as I've had a problem with how they played out initially. But I think in the last few months, in the last year, we've definitely seen an improvement in the quality of fighter and for me, it's less the quality of fighter. I think when you do a pod like this and you're covering a different level of MMA, we're not looking at PFL, we're not looking at Bellator, we're not looking at the UFC, right? We're not looking at Reis or any international kind of promotion with a lot more firepower and money. When you talk about Cage Warriors, I'm not here for the quality of fighter so much as I am for the meaningfulness and the quality of fights, right? And I feel like there isn't much meaningfulness in these San Diego cards, but I think we're starting to get there. We're starting to get there, and it's a work in progress. But I definitely feel like when I watch these cards now, I'm getting a little bit more than just 0-1 guy versus 1-0 guy, both making their debut. One has a funky nickname, the other one doesn't. I feel like we're getting somewhere. So this card was a tight, snappy card, 9 fights. Didn't watch it live because time zone, and also it's fucking boiling in the UK right now. If you're anywhere in the UK right now, it's mad. I'm in London. It's insane. Our houses aren't built or prepared for this kind of heat, and it's been a bit sucky. I was supposed to record this on Sunday evening, couldn't. Literally it was boiling, and I'm recording it now on Monday afternoon. It's all right, but still a bit hot, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about fights for the next 45 minutes because one, aren't that many fights to talk about. Quality of fights here was a mixed bag, and also, like I said, it's boiling. So we'll start at the top like we always do, work our way down. Trevin Jones versus Wilson Hayes was the main event of this card, and the card was built around this fight. Really, really weird fight for me. I'm a big Wilson Hayes guy. Anyone that knows anything about me knows that, it's almost a meme at this point. The kind of fighter that I like is the veteran, the dogged fighter, the guy who, your Mick Stantons, your Wilson Hayes, these kind of fighters, that's what I like. Judo gym, just gritty veterans. Maybe because I've been watching the sport for so long. These guys weren't veterans when I first started watching it. They were newcomers, and now I've probably just gained some sort of appreciation for them over the years, especially as I get older and they get older. There's probably some sort of connection there, and I think for the younger gens, maybe it will be the same, right? Some people are now getting to a point where, I don't know, like Max Holloway, for example, right? I started watching MMA way before Max Holloway, but for a lot of people, he's probably, now that he's getting older, people feel more of an attachment to him. I don't know. These guys, maybe a Cub Swanson's a better example, like a Korean Zombie. I think those are probably better examples. But Wilson Hayes, this is my guy. Love Wilson Hayes. Didn't go too well for him in this fight. Trevin Jones, of course, on a pretty massive losing streak in the UFC. I think he lost to Cody Garbrandt, was cut, and then ended up here. Good to see him make his Cage Warriors debut. I think there's a lot of value in picking up these types of fighters, especially for the stateside cards. Guys with a bit more name value, coming off the UFC. I thought, look, for me, and I'll always say it, and again, it's probably the bias kicking in, but I thought Wilson Hayes was well in title contention. I think he's done great work in the US and in Europe as well to build himself back up. He's been with the promotion for ages. Obviously a massive gap in there from when he was in the UFC, but he's someone who's been around the promotion, and I thought he was well within title shot range. I don't think Trevin Jones is by winning this fight. I think he's, it could be one of those where maybe we see him one more time, maybe we don't see him again. Maybe he gets picked up by a different promotion. But yeah, weird fight. I personally scored it 29-28 Hayes, but Jones got the split decision in the end. It was a drab fight. It was a weird fight. You couldn't separate it on damage, you really couldn't. For the most part, it was really just who controlled the fight more. I feel like you really had to go down the scoring criteria to get to something that was agreeable for either fighter. And I think they both controlled the fight for similar amounts. It was a very, very close one. Not one you'll ever go back and rewatch. Although in round 2 there was a nice little scramble at one point. Hayes had a really nice slam takedown. I personally scored it. I had the fight 19-19 going into round 3. I thought Hayes just edged round 3, but I'm not here to argue with anyone who thinks Trevin Jones won for 2 reasons. It was a very close fight, and 2, I'm not going to sit here and waste a lot of energy arguing at a scorecard for a fight that was, to be frank, not interesting, not entertaining whatsoever. Shame to see Hayes lose. Definitely has more legs than Jones when it comes to attaining gold in the Cage Warriors promotion. I don't know that Trevin Jones is someone who's going to fight in Europe and then do it stateside and balance the 2. But we'll see. Not a crazy amount to say. I don't want to waste you guys' time. For me, there were a lot more interesting fights on this card, and that's where I want to move on to now. Roberto Hernandez versus Toby Misek. So this fight between Roberto Hernandez and Toby Misek, or Misek, I'm just going to call him Toby. It was really interesting because Toby missed weight by a couple of pounds, which, if you look at his tapology, it seems like it's something he does. Roberto Hernandez, on the other hand, for me, one of the hottest prospects in Cage Warriors, period. We don't even need to segregate it by San Diego versus Europe, blah, blah, blah. We do not need to do that. For me, Roberto Hernandez is top quality talent, in my opinion. I think what I like about Hernandez is, you know the grappling's there, he can wrestle his ass off, he can grapple, but he's fallen in love with his hands, and it's really shown. I always say this, but attrition to the body, hell yeah. If you're an MMA fighter, you're punching and kicking to the body, you are a friend of mine, and I'm going to watch all your fights because not enough fighters do it, and if you do it, you're just straight up cool. And Roberto Hernandez is one of those guys. Had a really nice roundhouse kick to the body in the first round, I believe it was. Hernandez's footwork is brilliant. It's just savvy, it's clean. He's able to just slide in and out of range and just put damage on people, and our good friend Toby here definitely felt that. Although Roberto Hernandez did get kicked in the dick a couple of times in round 1, but he just persevered, managed to see through the round. I think Hernandez just continues to show himself as a solid mixer of the martial arts. That's what I would say, a good way to define him. I love that, in an exchange, even though he's fallen in love with his hands, when there's an exchange, in this fight especially, just dipped for the single leg, took Toby down, just dominated him on the ground, dipping right hand to the body is just glorious, right? And then in round 2, another roundhouse to the body, started going to the head. Then in the midst of an exchange, Hernandez sneaks in a lovely, lovely, clean left hand to deliver, which has shut Toby down. It was a great finish, and for me, Roberto Hernandez needs to be he's in title contention, in my opinion. You can't deny it anymore. He's been at the promotion for a while. He's won a hell of a lot of fights. He's finished dudes. He's beaten veterans like John De Jesus, which we'll talk about later, another fighter that I really, really enjoy watching. I think Roberto Hernandez is the real deal. I think you put him in there, you give him a shot in Europe, and if he wins that, you probably have him in title contention, really, because I don't think there's a lot more that this guy needs to do to prove himself, and I think it's only a matter of time before the bigger promotions come knocking, in my opinion. So Roberto Hernandez versus Toby, whose last name I will not pronounce. Go back and watch it if you haven't, if just to watch a talented young fighter do his thing. Speaking of talented young fighters, John De Jesus, who isn't young, he's very old, and that was me attempting to make a joke and then realizing that I have zero capabilities of delivering jokes, and so you're now sitting here listening to me cringe at my own attempt to deliver a joke. John De Jesus, Elijah Leggett. Crazy to me that on Tapology, Elijah Leggett was a massive favourite to win this fight. I know people go on there, they don't know the fighters, they do their picks based on maybe records or in recent performances. I'm here to tell you, John De Jesus is that guy. I've been saying it for a while. How on earth this guy is, 16 and 11? I don't know. How on earth he's lost 11 fights? I mean, yes, he's also fought a who's who of guys like Billy Quarantillo and a bunch of others who are now in the UFC, but John De Jesus is just awesome. He's so unorthodox, he's so quirky the way he strikes, but there's a good fundamental nature behind it. Elijah Leggett was really good in this fight too, and I enjoyed this fight. Straight up, I enjoyed this fight. I think it was one of the better fights of the night. There seemed to be a bit of animosity between them, but it was quashed at the end. Just loved that, neither guy was given the other an inch. And John De Jesus, for me, I scored it 30-27. I can see how you'd give Leggett a round potentially in this fight, but just a high-paced striking bout. Stare down at the end of round 1 was top tier. Really liked that. De Jesus stepping knee at one point was nice. This guy just knows how to kill a prospect. Like, this is why I always put a lot of stock in Roberto Hernandez beating John De Jesus, because a lot of these guys with 5-1, 6-1, 6-2, 7-2, these guys usually don't beat John De Jesus. Like, he'll go in there and he'll just consistently beat prospects. And yeah, just an awesome fighter. Round one, what I really enjoyed was towards the end of the feet, the slicing towards the end of the round, when De Jesus got back to his feet, is what I was trying to say, after some grappling. He had a really nice slicing elbow that just ripped a cut on Leggett's hairline, and it was a cut that stayed throughout the fight, and I think that really helped De Jesus kind of stifle and target an area that would show attrition, that would show damage on the face of his opponent. The counter knee, the stepping knee, De Jesus, he's just brilliant to watch. In the third round, he punished the lead leg really well, just consistently clubbing away at it, and then he was jawing away at him as well in the third round. So much swagger from De Jesus. Like, he's a veteran, he's had loads of fights, he's won a bunch, he's lost a bunch. It's good to see a fighter like that still have confidence and clearly enjoys what he's doing as well. Just a banging fight. If you're going to go back and rewatch it, there's this fight I'd recommend. There's another on the card as well in terms of a good back and forth scrap. 30-27 De Jesus, maybe 29-28 Leggett, but convincing win for De Jesus, and just a fun guy to watch on these San Diego cards. Heavyweights, just a term that doesn't excite anyone if you have even half a brain cell, but I'm here to talk to you about them because Sean Rose versus Ian Dorby was a fight that ended in the first round, and we love heavyweight fights that end in the first round because they save us from bad gas tanks, they save us from having to watch bad striking, they save us from having to watch many things. So thank you guys. Anyone above 205 pounds, thank you for ending your fights in round one. Ian Dorby is now my favourite fighter. Jokes aside, fun fight for as long as it lasted. I mean, Dorby just immediately was like, I'm just going to take you down, and there's nothing you can do about it. The guy's jacked as fuck. You don't really see body types like that in MMA anymore, and you were more used to seeing them in the early 2000s, where, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. If you catch my drift of where I'm going there, I'm maybe insinuating a few things here. But Ian Dorby, just dominant wrestling. Sean Rose had no chance. Strike after strike after strike on the ground. It was just a mugging, like a pure straight up mugging. Ian Dorby, guy's jacked to shit. Great win for him. Will we see him again? I don't know. Cage Warriors doesn't really put on heavyweight fights very often, but potentially maybe there's someone he throws on, or maybe he's someone they throw onto these San Diego cards just because they know it can rile up a crowd and get people excited as well. Alex Trinidad versus Lucas Martino was a fight that certainly happened. I don't have a crazy amount to say about this fight. Another one where a lot of cage grinding, a lot of cage control, not a crazy amount of good moments. There was a nice side kick in one of the rounds which, you know, dominated my notes for the most part in terms of strikes that excited me and interested me. But for the most part, I mean, it really was not much to write home about with this one. I had it 19-19 going into round 3 actually, and I think in the end Trinidad just took it. It was a dull fight. He controlled the fight a lot better. Again, damage couldn't really separate either man. But Alex Trinidad, the cool thing about this is obviously great nickname, the Ice Cream Man, and the crowd were chanting it as well, which I found hilarious. But the cool thing about this was it was Alex Trinidad's retirement fight. Always happy to see MMA fighters retire on wins because this is a brutal sport and retiring on a win is never a given. So Alex Trinidad, happy trails to him. Not a crazy amount to say about this one either. So that was all of the fights on the main card. We then move on to the prelims, which actually had some really interesting fights. So prelim headliner was Brian Mitchell versus James Settle. Enjoyed this fight. I had it 29-28 to Mitchell. James Settle, for me, I really enjoyed his last fight a few months ago in Cage Warriors. And Brian Mitchell, good to see him in action here. Really interesting fight because for me, James Settle is an awesome kicker. Like a really, really awesome kicker. And I don't think that Mitchell did a great job in the first 2 rounds. How do you beat a kicker? You crowd the kicker, right? For the most part. I mean, we're coming off the back of a weekend where Sean Strickland is somehow the UFC champion, which I'm not even going to get into. It's a timeline I don't even want to engage in, and it'd be cool if we lived in a different universe. But how did Sean Strickland win against Adesanya? Crowded him, denied him the ability to build off his kicks, and proved that Adesanya can't box, right? Like, that's something that we learned. Not comparing James Settle versus Brian Mitchell to Adesanya versus Strickland, of course, but Brian Mitchell did well to not just crowd Settle, but also circle really well so that Settle couldn't do a crazy amount. Though Settle was landing some really good calf kicks, for the most part, Mitchell was patient, he was crowding Settle, and then he was landing these really slick jabs, 1-2s, a few like power strikes in there behind the 1-2. Just some good stuff from Mitchell in round one. I gave him that first round, but they were both trading calf kicks. So Settle was definitely building with the attrition to the leg. And the reason I mention that is because, in round two, Mitchell became even more comfortable, landed a lot more. Shoulder rolling was like really nice. Like, it was like a Bobby Green style approach. It's really nice kind of boxing combinations from him. Confident, a lot of swagger. Settle had a good head kick in there, though, that slightly rattled Mitchell towards the end. But generally, it was 2018. Mitchell was kind of cruising to a win. But like I said, Settle's landing his calf kicks. And what happens, if you land enough of them, eventually it can change the course of a fight. And while it didn't change the course of this fight, it certainly changed the course of the round that was to follow. Because in round three, James Settle completely took over, started throwing with more volume, landing with more frequency, nice prodding teeps to the body, which I thought was good. And the calf kicks were there all night long, and Mitchell started to slow down. I mean, it was evident. I don't know if it was a cardio thing or if really like Settle had reduced his movement to just kind of plodding forward and taking more damage. But 29-28 Mitchell in the end, a good win for him. James Settle's always fun to watch. It's a really interesting fight from a technical perspective. So if you're looking for like a technical back and forth, this might be the fight for you. However, the fight that came just before it, which is the one we'll talk about next, Terrence Saeteurn versus David Lopez. Boy, oh boy, was that a banger. That might be one of my favourite Cage Warriors fights of the year. It didn't have the explosiveness of Riley and Parker, and maybe didn't have the the sheer craziness of that Yanis Bakar fight. But I've got to say, like, in terms of grappling, and if you know anything about me, I love grappling, jiu-jitsu and judo especially. This fight was dope because David Lopez, as far as I understand it from what I've seen of his fights, he's a grappler, he likes to wrestle. Terrence Saeteurn, I'm somewhat new to, and in this fight he blew me away. If you're looking for the best performance on this card, Terrence Saeteurn might be that guy. Like, genuinely, just an awesome fighter. Has a suplex at one point in the fight, which was nice. I mean, we all love a suplex, but the level of scrambles in this fight, of arm bars turning into reversed positions and then butterfly guards, it was just insane. Like, the not just the quality of the grappling, that makes it sound like they grappled for 15 minutes. They really didn't. And when they struck, it was clear that Terrence Saeteurn was the better striker, but Lopez was the heavier striker. So the more powerful, should I say. Terrence Saeteurn on the feet, really nice jab, really comfortable. David Lopez, more of like a wing and hook, overhand right kind of guy, like a traditional grappler type. And that made this fight so compelling because when it was on the ground, these two were insane. Like, the amount of... I feel like if this was on a European card, the commentary would have been losing their minds, right? On the US scene, commentary team is different for the most part, and they did a good job, but this would have been much better appreciated on the on a standard like UK card, for example, or Rome or something like that. But I get it, they're both US guys, you do it in San Diego. I digress. Just the grappling was so much fun, and when they struck, it was, again, great to watch. Terrence Saeteurn is, for me, immediately someone I'm always going to keep an eye on now. I think he's improved to 4-1 with that win. I gave him the decision. I thought he won all 3 rounds. Just a super exciting prospect. I cannot wait to watch this guy fight again. Like, genuinely, I'm kind of lost for words because the more I think about it, the more I'm like, that fight is not getting spoken about much by anyone, and it's going to get forgotten. And actually, the grappling exchanges were just brilliant. Like, One of my favorite fights of all time is Tim Elliott versus Louis Smolka, which no one ever talks about. It was like 2017, I think it happened in Kansas. It was a fight night, 15 minutes of just amazing rolling. This isn't to that level, and they certainly don't roll for the entire fight, but this reminded me of that, and it reminded me of the joy that MMA can give from a grappling perspective when you've got two guys who just know how to cancel each other out. Really enjoyable fight. Terrence Saeteurn, remember the name because I really think he's going to be a prospect that we're going to have to engage with a lot more in the future. Hope to see him again very, very soon. So the last two fights on the card, I guess we can cover them both kind of in tandem, I guess. Bobby Winther defeated Marcus Wolston via second round knockout. It was like 10 seconds into round two, knocked out Marcus Wolston. Bobby Winter's a guy to watch, someone who's quite credible as an amateur. I think he in the circuit in the US. I mean, I believe he was undefeated as an amateur. Really good grappler from what I've heard and from what I've seen. Comes into this fight in his professional debut against Marcus Wolston, knocks him out in round two after some good work in round one as well. Someone to definitely keep an eye on. I mean, the social media reaction to Winther winning tells me that he's got a really kind of blossoming fan base. So he's someone that I definitely want to see more of. I was really impressed with his performance in that fight. And then we had Manuel Medina versus Anthony Walken. Not a crazy amount to say about this fight, purely because it ended after like 30 seconds in round one. If I recall correctly, I mean, Medina took Walken to the ground, circled to his back, took his back, choked him out. It was super, super quick. It was a rapid finish. Just one of those where I would have liked to have seen Manuel Medina do more, because, you know, he's a guy we've never seen in Cage Warriors before. He's come into this fight 1-3, which doesn't spark much excitement, and the guy who was fighting was 0-0, Anthony Walken. So again, I don't know if Walken was the guy who was supposed to win. I haven't looked at betting lines. Maybe it was a shock or something like that, but maybe I need to watch more of Manuel Medina. It was pretty exciting. It was a nice like little finish to get the card started, and that was pretty much the card, right? Like, we only had 9 fights. It wasn't incredibly exciting for the most part. There were some good moments in there, like go watch Bobby Winter's knockout, go watch Manuel Medina's submission, definitely watch Terrence Saeteurn versus David Lopez if you want a good grappling fight. If you want a good technical striking fight, go watch Brian Mitchell versus James Settle. Alex Trinidad fight, forgettable. Ian Dorby, I guess forgettable, like first round knockout, but heavyweights and it's all on the ground. It's not very compelling. John de Jesus, Elijah Leggett, go watch that. Very fun fight. Roberto Hernandez, go watch the finish, or just go watch him beat a man's body for like a round and a half. Trevin Jones, Wilson Hayes, you can skip that completely. It's hit and miss for me. Like I said, these San Diego cards, they're improving, but they can be hit and miss, especially when there's a bunch of fighters here who they're clearly building up and we don't know much about them yet. But you also have to give credit to the promotion. We didn't know who Roberto Hernandez was a year and a half ago, and now we're talking about him in title contention. So not coming at the quality of fighter being recruited, just the meaningfulness of fights. I would love to start seeing these guys. I know it's harder to get them on visas and get them to fight abroad, but would love to see some of these guys take their skills to Europe and see how they fare against better opposition, against opposition with big names in hostile environments, hostile crowds. That would be so cool for me. I want to see Roberto Hernandez in the UK 100%. That's the next one I want to see. I'd love to see Trevin Jones in there, like having a former UFC fighter in there that maybe a bantamweight, a highly rated bantamweight, can go in against and put on a show. Maybe Reis McEwen versus Trevin Jones, or Nathan Fletcher versus Trevin Jones. These are the kind of fights I want to see, just to build up the guys who are, you know, the legitimate talents in the promotion against these guys who are veterans, and then on the flip side, get all these talents from the San Diego card that have put in the work, like Roberto Hernandez, and let them flourish in Europe if you can sort out visas and passports and all of that. So I'll always reserve my judgment on every San Diego card. I'll do my best to cover it and to have pods and we can talk about them, but not a crazy amount to talk about in this card in general. I've kind of given as much of a breakdown as I would have wanted to. It's really hot. I don't fancy talking much longer. you've got a very short episode from me, less than 30 minutes. Appreciate it, because the next time we talk will be the Manchester card, and that's going to be a banger, and it's going to be our usual long 45 minutes to an hour of you guys listening to me wax lyrical about stuff. So biggest takeaway from this card, Roberto Hernandez, is he the real deal? I think so. And the second biggest takeaway is Terrence Saeteurn versus David Lopez, one of the best fights this year in Cage Warriors. You'll forget about it, and a lot of people won't talk about it. Please listen to me, go watch it, and go scream about it so more people can watch it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast. Please drop a like or comment or anything, engage with me, share it far and wide. Anything that can help boost the podcast in the eyes of the MMA public, that would make me very happy. And I guess I will catch you all on the next one.